What was that?
Like your daily life.
Oh, the
photo.
reminder. Yeah, that's great.
Cute.
Yo, what's up? What's up? It's Chris. We out here in Gamba, checking in. I hope you're doing well. Hanging out with Tori. Tori, no pants is over here on the side. Yeah. So we're going to talk about something real quick. And it's actually spawned from a conversation that I had with a friend, Lex Friedman, who I saw when I was in California. And we're talking about like housing and landlords and things of that nature. And I don't mean with the cigarette, I really can't.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that we talked about is this idea like are landlords inherently bad? And this idea of there's so many people that own property, and what do they do with the property? They charge other people to live on it. And why is it that one group of people owns property and they are technically the capitalists, and other people are the proletariat and they are renters, or they're the people that have to rely on the goodwill or whatever capitalist nature of the owner who has land that lets them stay there? That's a perspective. One of the other perspectives is that like if you don't have the capital to own or maintain land, it's great that there's someone else that would do it and then allow you to rent or allow you to still have access to the land. And is that somehow socially beneficial? For people who want to travel all the time, or for people that don't want to have to replace a boiler or have to fix the stove or refrigerator every time something goes wrong, it's great that there's a landlord, there's someone else that'll take care of it. Or if you think about medieval time periods or the past, this idea of the landlord, and that there was the lord and vassals, and the vassals protected the land of the lord, and that the peasants or serfs worked the land but were given protection from the other lords or vassals that may attack them, and the knights had another role and they were the warriors and all this other stuff. So in contemporary society, are we still working in that system, which kind of involves indentured servitude and sharecropping and things that aren't so beneficial to the peasants? And are us as the commoners just peasants, and our landlords, are they still like lords of the land? And how does that work? And what is the balance on then, like, are you wrong if you own multiple properties, don't live in one, and then rent it out and make some money for it? Black land ownership is on that. Like, buy land. Now, what you do with it is another question. I believe in being responsible. I believe in understanding community. I believe personally in not being exploitative or like trying to just extract resources from the land or getting the most you can out of it. But thinking about sustainability, thinking about community, thinking about collective ownership. And maybe blockchain and some of the new technologies can allow for collective ownership in a way we couldn't in the past. Sometimes paperwork and the way like individually oriented capitalism functions, maybe that is bad for people. But that collective ownership is very difficult in our current legal system. Go ask a lawyer about 7 people owning property. And the first thing a lawyer will say, well, are they a corporation? Have they already identified who owns what, has the ability to make decisions, and what happens if it dissolves? If not, don't buy land together. Well, real estate investment trusts are people that buy land together, and that allows for people to purchase land and property you normally couldn't afford as an individual. So maybe there's some benefits. So when we were talking, this idea of landlords, and it was like, landlords. Well, my mom technically is a landlord. She rents out an apartment to a friend of mine. Now, to me, it's been a good relationship where my friend has a place to live that is being rented under market value, and my mom has a person in the house that she can somewhat trust. And so that's good. As my mom gets older, she's able to still generate some income outside of her fixed income because she owns property and she worked her ass off her entire life. So that's a win-win. But then when we think about the people that own my building, it's a management company, and they have like 5 or 7 different buildings with hundreds of different people in them. And do they care about us as individuals? Do they care about us as tenants? And when this pandemic hit, did they give us a discount? No. When the pandemic hit, we gave our homie Kenneth, he got a discount. And my mom was like, yo, we'll cut your rent a reasonable amount, not just like $50, so that you can make it through this. And so I remember during that time period of like rent strike, no one paid rent. I was like, yeah, that works if we're talking about me not paying my landlord to have 7 buildings and who've made hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if my tenant decides not to pay my mom's mortgage still has to get paid to the bank. So whenever we do that cancel rent stuff, or when we say people boycott rent, how does that really work for folks in my mom's scenario? What's the outcome of that? And should my mom have to then eat the bill because the tenant says we canceling rent? Well, what happens if my mom says, well, I won't pay the bank? The bank still come take the property from her. There was an eviction moratorium but there wasn't a moratorium on the bank claiming its property if you still are making payments and mortgage payments on the house. So I've been talking to different people about this idea of canceling rent. I need somebody to explain the economics of it, the legality of it, because so far no one does. Anytime people say cancel rent, and I'm like, so how does that work? They say, well, people shouldn't be paying for housing anyway. That's not what we're talking about. I said, how do we cancel rent? Rent is a private agreement. The government, unless you're in public housing, it cannot cancel your rent. I have a private agreement I've made with the owner of this building, and the government can't come in and say, I don't owe that money anymore. Because then the owner of the building, they're still paying a mortgage to a bank. So that bank also has loaned money out with the expectation of getting money back based on people paying rent. And there's a whole futures market based on it. So how does it actually work, right? Now, the government can say, we will put a moratorium on eviction because the government actually adjudicates evictions. The government and the state are the ones that can remove you from a building forcibly. So they can say, we won't evict people. We can stop that. But the government can't say you don't owe the money in a privately agreed upon arrangement. So if the government were to say, cancel rent, what happens? Do they just give me the money to then pay off what's owed? Sorry, I had to turn on the music. Does the government then give me the money to then pay off what's owed to my landlord? Does the government give the money to my landlord so that they can pay off their mortgage? Does the government give the money to banks so the banks can say, we don't want your money anymore, we got it from the government? And then does the government give money to who the banks take money from? Because also the banks borrow money. If you're unaware of that, the banks get money from other larger financial institutions in order to be able to facilitate our economic environment. And you've heard of this idea of too big to fail, right? So if the banks don't get their money back, doesn't that start to cause a trickle down, which is horrible economics, issue? And so how does it work? Can somebody tell me the economics of canceling rent? Can somebody tell me the legality of canceling rent? Because if you were to step in and say, I don't have to pay my landlord, how can the government tell my landlord I don't owe them money? It doesn't, it's a private agreement. So if Tori and I have an exchange and Tori's supposed to give me money every month, and in exchange I let Tori come hang out in front of my spot and we have some arrangement, and the government says you can't collect money from Tori anymore, how do they have the right to get involved in my personal agreement, right? They don't have the right to do that. The government can't tell the bank I don't owe them money anymore, unless they somehow can say the original agreement was not legitimate, which now we're starting to get into issues of is private property legitimate or not. But that's another conversation. And when I was talking to the homie, they're like, yeah, but all these unhoused people, that's not who we're talking about. Unhoused people not having places to live while people have buildings that are empty, that's another conversation. But if I already have an agreement with my landlord and I'm supposed to pay rent every month, how can the government say I don't owe that money? And what's the economics of it? Where's the money come from to replace it? Because at some point, someone has to pay off the debt, unless we cancel all debts. Now, when people bring up, how do you cancel student loan? Well, that's an agreement possibly made between the government and private institutions. What's up, bro? And the government can renege all the time, and you're not allowed to sue the government. So if the government owes people money, they can choose not to pay, and if you try to take them to court, they can say, no, in a federal court, we don't allow you to sue us, and you're never gonna get your money. So that's one thing, that's another issue. But in terms of us as people, someone let me know. So someone who's smart, someone who's not smart, someone who knows stuff about economics, someone who knows nothing about economics. Somebody tell me how canceling rent would work. I want to understand the economics of it and the legality of it. All right, not just the theory. I get the idea of money's fake. Yeah, I got it. Well, some people believe God's fake, but people are killing each other over it right now, so it becomes real. Some people would say race is fake, it's a social construction. But yeah, let me walk into a spot and I start smiling on them, and look how people treat me. All right, so we can say race is fake, but the outcome of people believing in race is very real. So whether or not money is real, that's another conversation. But now that we believe in money, and now that I have a tenant in my mom's house, if all of a sudden he starts going like, yo, I'm canceling rent. Well, the bank is still like, we didn't cancel rent, you gotta pay your mortgage. And if the bank were to say, well, we don't need your money anymore, Mr. Banks or Mr. Card, whatever they want to call me. Well, what happened to all the money that they've invested based on this idea of returns on future investments, and knowing that they'll get 6% or 12% or whatever their return is, or whatever interest rate there is? All these things are set up and in place. And if you want to say crypto's fake, well, so are derivatives. So are a whole lot of stuff. But it plays out, you know? And so I'm just wondering, what's the science? What's the math? Somebody smarter than me help me understand it, all right? And it doesn't make sense. I know. Where did capital come from? Why is the earth all of a sudden partitioned and cordoned off and no one's allowed to use it but the person that has a piece of paper that says they own the deed? That's another conversation. But once we have a deed, once we have a paperwork, once we have loans, once we have bills, how can the government cancel our bills that are privately originated? All right? That's what I want to know. And so let me know. Do your research. Holler at me. All right. Peace.